I just am so excited to welcome Eboni Banks to our podcast today. She has had quite the journey, but she's learned some very important things along the way that I'm really excited about having a conversation. Because I think that often, Ebony, we don't listen to our gut, but you're here by your own choice because you want to share that journey with us. Please,
Yes.
please introduce yourself and let's just get started. Let's talk about Ebony from Brooklyn, New York, and her journey.
Yes. Well, actually, I'm from Silver Spring, Maryland, but New York has been home for many, many years. But I guess, my name is Ebony Banks and I'm a mystic, first and foremost. And I'm also a trauma survivor. And the way that I process my trauma and the way that I've been guided by my intuition to, support myself in my own healing has just been so powerful for me that it's completely changed my life. And I'm just, wanting to share with other people and in particular trauma survivors.
Oh, I'm so excited because I think so often we kind of have this idea that we have to do it a certain way. And for different people and different, whatever the trauma is that someone has survived, I believe that there are
Mhm.
probably as many ways to heal from that or to take that
Yeah,
journey forward as there are nuances to trauma. So, would you mind
absolutely.
going back a little bit and just
Yeah.
we focus on childhood sexual trauma, and those are our main focus, but whatever you'd like to share with us to kind of bring us up to speed, like where you came from and where we're going with this
Yeah.
testing your gut and intuition as a mystic and all of that that I want to hear so much about. It's very
Yeah.
exciting.
It's so much too, and it's been a lifelong journey, that my spiritual expression has been a part of who I am since I was a child that I've been aware of, I've been very aware of this, and so my traumas didn't happen until I was in my early 20s, and, being a spiritual person has really helped me and guided me to understand, um, what might sound odd to people, but I found purpose in my trauma, and I found a way to, I guess, make it make sense, but not like in a it's very real. Like the way that I understand it, it's very real. And it's not like a made sense just to make me feel better. It really connects to like the entirety of my life experience um and how I process life in general. So yes, it's been a lifelong thing.
And it's interesting that you say, I was in my early 20s when I experienced trauma. I really consider anyone that's 25 years or younger as still
Yeah,
developing. Brain development is still happening. So much of the
absolutely.
emotional development, consequences don't even come into play. That's why teenagers run out in the
Yeah.
middle of the road and think nobody will hit them because those consequence parts of your brain haven't happened. And so when someone is harmed or assaulted in their early 20s, I believe it
Yeah.
has a very deep impact on the way that life then unfolds and how much it affects our lives. So for me,
Yeah.
Earth to about 25, we're still children. So I may say childhood sexual abuse, but I really am including that whole entire, group of
Okay.
survivors. Yeah.
That's good to know because, yes, I'm definitely in that category, and I'm a rape survivor. And the rape resulted in a pregnancy that I aborted, and I repressed that for many years, and I just started having sex, And so, yeah, it's had a huge impact on my entire life.
So before that trauma happened, before the rape happened, you were saying you were already a spiritual kind of person. Was that
Yeah.
religious or was it just a spiritual quest that you were taking prior to? How were you raised? A little bit.
So it's a mix of both. So I was definitely raised as a Christian, went to Baptist churches my entire life, Sunday school every Sunday, However, my family lineage also, my maternal great grandmother read palms for a living. And this is in the 1940s in the Jim Crow South. She's a very unusual woman with a very unusual lifestyle, And just last Saturday,
Yeah.
yeah, and an unusual gift, and was able to practice it and, to be lucrative in the 1940s, which is not a typical lifestyle that you hear of a Black woman in this country having, right? And, just last Saturday, I was with, a family member who was celebrating his 94th birthday, and, he was telling me how he remembers, her coming to visit, and she had a chauffeur and a driver, and so, look, my family also understands that there's another way of experiencing life, and processing life, outside of Christianity because of our experience of her. So I didn't learn about her until I was in my 20s, though. But as a child, I was having highly intuitive experiences and I didn't understand them and pretty much just thought I was really smart. And that's how I knew things that people didn't tell me. So as a child, what I now understand is I was experiencing what is known as claircognizance, which is clear knowing. Most people are probably more familiar with clairvoyant.
Yeah.
There's a really, that's a popular term that we hear, but there are several clair senses. I experienced four of the seven that,
Please tell us a little bit about that. Like, could you take
yeah,
an early childhood experience that you were having and describe it to us,
yeah,
and then match it to those 4 of the 7?
yes.
I I
Well, as a child,
yeah, but is it's a better word. Teach me
well,
something new today.
the way I have come to understand it is a gift. However, it's a gift that every single person has. It's not specific to any certain kind of person. I think we all have the ability to cultivate this gift. I think we are all using it all the time at a, beginner level and have the ability to cultivate it more if we choose to. So as a child, so what was happening? I would just know things that people didn't tell me, and it would usually come up when I was playing or doing something, and I processed it then as kind of, wanting it to go away because I didn't understand it. So I would just be like, okay, yeah, go away. And I would just know things. And then later on I would see the thing that I know, I would hear about it, overhear it in adult conversations, or it would play out in actual life. So I
Good
just didn't know.
example.
Oh, goodness. Well, the one that stands out for me the most is when I was with an uncle. My mom and I it was her brother, and we were visiting him at his house. And he at the time was using like illicit drugs that are, yeah, he was using illicit drugs at the time. And I just knew, and I was probably like 6 or 7, and I knew where he was going to take me. Like he wanted me to go with him to run an errand, and he took me with him to this place, and I knew where I was going before I got there. And that's one example that I can think of because like I said, as a child, I didn't want it to happen, and I kinda shooed it away, like, I didn't really want it to happen, so I didn't pay as much attention, and as I got older, it expanded for me. And then even once my healing journey started, it expanded even more, which I think is a bit unusual because typically children are very susceptible and very open to receiving like the natural spiritual gift that we all have. And as we age and as we become adults, we tend to not believe in it. We don't understand it, or for whatever reason, we just distance ourselves from that way of expressing ourselves. But for me, as I healed myself, like, it got stronger and it expanded.
So interesting. Do you have any thoughts on why we seem to push these kinds of experiences away from us? Is it because we become more logical thinkers and we just don't trust
I
that?
think there's so many. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's all. No, I want your take on that because it is something that I do think most of us is that part of development, is that part of growing up that you distance yourself, and yet you came back to it in a big way, you know?
Yeah, and it came back to me, and I'll share that story too, but I don't know why we do that. I mean, I think in general, so many of us have a difficult time, like, just owning how beautiful we are as human beings, right? Because life is challenging and life presents us with all these things that are difficult. And so it distorts our view of life, you know? And we forget that life is loving and that, it's meant to be enjoyable. And it's this really beautiful gift, just being alive and having breath. And so I think it's just connected to like all the things that live in our life experiences that take us away from that knowing. It's just one of the things in the pile, you know? And we just tend to start to not to believe in it because we find things to be difficult.
Right, and I think for me anyway, I think looking back on my own experiences and my own traumatic, excuse me, experiences,
Yeah.
I really see where that vulnerability between that age, those middle school, junior high school years.
Mhm.
Like, I mean, you just can't help it. It's part of development. Like you want to fit in, you want people to like you. You're so worried about what everybody else thinks, even though that's what they're worried about too. What
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, really, and yet those seem to be the times where you just I don't know, for me, I look back and think I was more susceptible for the yes,
Mm,
I was, it was like my predator knew that I would be
mm,
perfect age, to be
mm.
a sponge, to be brainwashed or whatever. So it's just
Yeah,
interesting that in your natural physical development and your mental and emotional development too, there's such a, a desire to fit in, and certainly
yes.
we never talk about anything that is intuitive or gut-centered. We don't do that. We talk about everything but that.
Although now that it seems to be changing a lot, which is so nice, and I'm so excited for younger generations because, older generations absolutely didn't talk about these things, right? It was like only what you were told, you do what your family says, you believe their truth, you make their truth your truth. It's not about being an individual. But we are definitely in different times, where younger generations are really owning their individuality and exploring things away from their family belief systems in ways that, older generations didn't do. So I think that is also a big factor. And, I also think, or I've noticed that the times when people typically want to get in tune with their spirituality is when something challenging has happened. They've lost a job, a marriage is ending, something difficult in their life presents itself. And that's kind of like the impetus to get to know, like to go to God or whatever it is that you call, non-physical intelligence and to kind of understand and to cultivate a relationship with that energy because some people just ignore it most of their lives until something happens that kind of you know, forces the person to want to know more or to understand more.
Yeah. I think that is true. A lot of times it's
Yeah.
like people will say that drove me to my knees,
Yeah.
whatever, like in prayer or in some way because a
Yep.
difficult experience does do that. You're like, I got to
Yes.
get in touch with my truth teller.
Yes.
you know, I
Yes.
I gotta figure out how to handle this, and it's not some experiences are really, really hard, and they are like, "I have no clue how to do this." So,
Yep.
in your trusting, your gut,
Yeah.
your higher energy is, I think you just said, to
Yeah.
basically create a better relationship with yourself or to
Yeah.
better understand, what to do, how does that support you in your ability, to live
Yeah.
the life that you want to live, and how did you overcome how did it first start with let me get more specific.
Okay.
After the rape after the rape,
Mhm.
and you were like, you know, whatever, at least for me, trauma completely destroyed my self-confidence, it completely
Mhm.
destroyed my ability to trust myself, right?
Mhm.
So, how about for you? What how did that ability come back, or how did you start to put those building blocks back together?
Yes, that's such a good question. And, my intuition was guiding me the entire time because I repressed my trauma for many years. And repression is it's a mental defense mechanism. I think Freud coined the term. And it's essentially when, someone experiences something so challenging that the brain push it pushes it away from consciousness as if it didn't happen. Right. So I'm acting out in very specific ways in certain kinds of relationships, but I hadn't consciously acknowledged to myself, that this thing happened and that I needed to deal with it for years. So, for a long time I wasn't acknowledging it. And then it kind of started coming back to me like on a rolling basis. This is how I process it anyway, because my intuition was guiding me to do all these spiritual things that I had never done before and to really explore all these things that I was really curious about, you know? And so I listened to myself and I did those things. And I think we all have those experiences. You hear about something that is of interest to you. However, we don't always follow through and look the thing up or like take the class or get more information about whatever it is. And all of that is guidance. It's your I like to think of my intuition as my true self, I kind of stay away from like high and low, but it's your true self really attempting to get your attention so that you can get to whatever it is that you're wanting, that will make you feel better, or happier, more joy, whatever the case may be. And so for me, I was guided to doing all these things, and I just really listened. And then I think that it kind of started happening in 2012, but it didn't come out of my mouth until 2016 when I was casually on the phone with a friend who was talking about his trauma, and I just said it to him. And that was the first time it ever, like, I was conscious enough about it for it to, like, to speak it, you know? So it kind of was happening for me over several years.
And it's interesting because, like, building blocks are like coming and I like how you said, "I don't really go with higher or lower," and I like that because you're just trying to get to your true self and listening
Yeah.
to that awareness that is already there, and you speak about there being a beginning like a beginner level, an intermediate level,
Yeah.
and a more advanced level. Could you describe
Yeah.
how you moved from level to level or how we might be able
Yeah.
to do that better with that relationship with ourselves, our inner awareness?
Absolutely. I believe everyone is already doing it at the beginner level. Whether you know it or not, whether you acknowledge it or not, it is already happening because we have all had those experiences when we didn't listen to our gut, when we knew something would turn out a certain way, maybe not even related to trauma or our healing journey, but just in life, right? Like you knew not to take that route that way because, or you knew something and you didn't listen to it. And then in hindsight, you're like, see, I knew I should have listened to that, so that's kind of like a beginner level, of really of listening to your intuition, right? Because it's speaking to us all the time, and it speaks to us in various ways. That's one way, but it can also speak to you in your outer world by, guiding you to something based on like maybe certain number associations that you have or anything that you like. It will use things that resonate with you to get your attention, right? So it could be literally anything in life that you like. It could be food, numbers, a song, a person. It could be anything, right? Um, yeah, so it's really about having an awareness and really staying present with yourself so that you can pay attention, so that you're paying enough attention to notice when those kinds of things are happening because we're so distracted and we're doing a million things all day long. And, our conversation with ourselves can be really loud, right? Just our inner conversation. It can be so loud. And so it's really about like staying aware with that conversation that you're always having with yourself. It pretty much never ends unless you're someone who meditates, which is why meditation is so powerful. And really paying attention to like when you're being guided. And your intuition will also only be loving. And that's something I always like to stress to people. It will only send you loving messages or a loving interpretation or a loving understanding of something. It would never like say something negative to you about yourself or about another person. So
That's interesting to just remember that it's going to be it's gonna be a loving guidance.
it's gonna be absolutely a loving guidance. It won't be something that you know, that you have a negative, response to. And the guidance, it's just such a genius the way that like how we are and how we work and this getting to know this part of our very own selves. Because the way the guidance works is it really draws on the entirety of your life experience. It has all the information about us from, utero. And so it knows us very well. And when I say it, I'm meaning you, right? Like, you very well. It's just this abstract. Um, but we know ourselves very well. And it's really about cultivating our relationship with that part of ourselves that exists and is with us and is incredibly loving as much as we cultivate the relationship with the other part of ourselves, that has to eat and exercise and go to sleep and go to work, right? It's about knowing that there's another aspect to you that exists that can give you so much loving guidance and information about your life.
Right. So as you're advancing in that awareness and that intuition and you're listening,
Yes,
at every level, how what would you describe like we're all doing it as beginners, right? That
yes,
you said. So
yes,
where do we go to the intermediate, to that advanced level? Is it more meditation? Or those the things that, is that it? Like
it's
we have to meditate more, we have to quiet ourselves more. Is it our environment? Tell us a little bit more about how to create the culture
yes.
around us.
I love
Now.
that. Yes, yes. So, yeah, I love that, and thank you for bringing me back there because I was going on a tangent, but it is. It is about, like, cultivating that environment, that inner environment. So, some people are just not into meditating and, like, that will never be their thing, right? Which is fine because there are other ways that you can get quiet, right? So, being quiet is a big thing. Spending time alone and being quiet can look like 2 different things because you can be alone and still be very loud with everything that's happening on the inside of you, right? So I just wanna make sure that people understand that that's not always the same. But it's really about quieting your what's happening on the inside of you, your inner world. And maybe you do that by playing a sport. Maybe basketball does that for you, or cooking, or gardening, or maybe like actually doing something helps you minimize your thoughts. But that's the key. You really want to minimize the thinking as much as possible. If you're not into meditation and you don't reach that place where you're not thinking at all, you want to find activities that will help you minimize the thoughts. Um, and really just having the awareness that, okay, there's more, like I am walking information about myself and my life, that nothing needs to happen outside of me, right? Outside support is always helpful and necessary. And I had a therapist and did all the outside work too, but I got most of the richness in my healing journey came from me, and so it's really about just having that awareness and really looking for it, like paying attention, paying expanding the attention that you give yourself, because then you will notice these things happening. And
Right.
at an advanced level, so I'm clear tangent, which is an unusual clear sense, which means clear touch. And I have sessions with clients where I give them readings, where I use my hands to get information about them. And I do remote readings using a teddy bear. And I also do like real in person, face to face readings, right? And so this is an advanced level of intuition. I put all the clear senses under intuition. And I learned I could do this accidentally. So again, listening to my guidance, this was 11 years ago. I was going to see this Reiki master, and I was at her house for an appointment that I thought I made to have something else done. She was prepared to attune me to Reiki, and I had no interest in Reiki at the time. So I just followed her guidance and what she wanted to do that day. And I learned accidentally, with a stranger in the park who saw us doing all these things and wanted to know if I could practice on him. I learned that I was clear tangent in that moment, for the very first time in my life. And 11 years later, I've been seeing clients and sharing, healing work with them in that way. So that's an advanced level use, like when you're actually, like when you're getting information about strangers in whatever way that that information comes to you. And I also experienced some of the other clear senses, but, so I think that's how it showed up for me, right? It will show up differently for other people.
So you mentioned that there are
Yeah.
7 different Claire what's the right word? I don't know the right
I call them clear senses.
senses, okay.
Yeah.
And you said you had 5 of the 7. Can you just
Yeah.
tell us what those are just to give us
Yeah.
that great education that I'm so hungry for? This is so
Yes, absolutely. And I think everyone is clear something. I think it's impossible not to be. It's just another form of intelligence that we just have to cultivate, right? And so clair tangent, the word clair, Clair, it just means clear. And then the ending tells you, what the I guess gift is, right? So clear tangent is clear touch, and I just explained how that works. Clairvoyant is clear vision. Some people will see things beyond what we're picking up with our normal eyes, right? Um, Clair sentient is clear feeling. And I think people who consider themselves empaths are actually clairsentient and maybe have never heard the word and don't know it, right? So many people are sensitive to feeling and they can get information from what they feel, right? And that's really all the clairsenses are. It's just another mode of getting information. So it is that one, two, three. So then the clairvoyant, clear tangent, clairsentient, clear olfactance, which is a really interesting one, which is smelling, right? People who can smell something and get information. And again, we're all doing all of these at a beginner level, right? And then there's clairgustance, which is tasting. Some people can taste something and get information. Yeah. There's clairaudience, which is hearing. And it's not the kind of hearing that you're hearing with my voice right now. It's more of an inner hearing, How many is that? Sentient, gustant, olfactant, voyant, audient, tangent. I'm missing one. I'm missing one.
But that was sick.
Um, Clairsentient, claircognizance, and that is clear knowing, which is a really popular one too. A lot of people experience that. Like when you just know something with no rational reason behind knowing it, no one told you, like you just know, and it could be anything, you know. So those are the seven clairs, and I've experienced all of them, but four of them I experience all the time. You know, people who are clairtangent are automatically tapping into clairsentient, clairvoyant, and some claircognizant at the same time because touch kind of triggers the other three. And that's an unusual thing for people who are clairtangent.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. So if you were like instructing someone and saying like I want to get more in touch with my own intuition, I want to recognize it. I want to use it more often in my daily life.
Yeah.
What are what would be some of those, tips you would give to me?
Yeah.
Just saying, gosh, I feel like I used to be more in touch with my own intuition and now I'm not. How can I bring it back or get better at it?
Yes. So there's so many things, you know. I highly recommend that people kind of based on like the seven clairs, I think that people, it's helpful to know like which way you kind of what you most resonate with, I guess I should say, right? Because we're all doing. And so once you can identify that, then it's really about really paying attention to all the ways that you are getting information that you're already doing it. You know, don't worry about like what has to happen, like how you want to experience it. Focus on how you're currently, how it's showing up for you today, right? Because it is. So focus on how it's showing up for you today. How are you able to get information? How do you recognize that you're getting information in any of these ways? And then once you have that awareness, it will really just expand for you because it's really all about your level of comfort in receiving it, because it's yeah, I think that's the best way I can say it. It is kind of a receiving in that way because it already lives inside of you. It's just a matter of you being comfortable enough with yourself to notice it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. It's like you have to be willing, maybe a willingness to be
Yeah,
really
maybe.
honest with yourself.
Yes, absolutely.
How you know, so often I feel like we are kind of out of touch with our feelings because
Yeah.
we've been taught, oh, well, we can't, don't cry in public or don't, there's just a lot of rules,
Yes. Yes.
kind of societal rules. And it's interesting how when you actually will just allow yourself to feel how you feel,
Yes.
and to want what you want,
Yes.
and to really be honest about those very basic things that,
Yes.
that a lot of times we're kind of shoving outside of ourselves or like, oh, I shouldn't this, I shouldn't that, or I should this. And I have a dear friend that one time, and I probably said this before, but she said, I just really try not to should on myself or others.
Yes.
It's like, oh, good. Right?
That is such a great practice, and I'm so glad you mentioned trusting yourself because that is really key, and it really takes a certain level of honesty with yourself to even be able to access this. Because a lot of people think it's kind of because it's a spiritual thing that you have to do something spiritual in order to access it. You have to do some ritual or pray or do. No, it's very practical and real life things that you have to do to access it, and it's really about being honest with yourself and about what you want because the way intuition works, the clairs and all other modes of intuition, right? No matter how it can show up as so many ways, it will only guide you to what you're wanting. So if you're not telling yourself the truth about what you want, then it cannot guide you. It can't guide, and so it's really important to be really honest. And then once we tell ourselves the truth, that can go in a whole lot of different directions, right? Like, it can be lovely, it can be painful, it can be work. There are a number of things that can happen once we start to tell ourselves the truth. And so, it's a journey in that way, but it really starts with that. So thank you so much for saying that.
Yeah, that's really of course, and I love that answer that, the truth isn't always, just, rainbows and unicorns. The
Yeah.
truth can be painful, and I've definitely experienced that, like, coming into the truth about, a situation or about myself or someone
Yeah.
in my life that, it's that can be very painful, and I think to know that you're going to experience some of that
Yep.
along with, the light, along with, there's bad times and good times,
Yeah.
and um, I know that you said, this has really helped you find, light in the darkness.
Yes.
And maybe you could give us an example or when or how that why you do
Yeah.
that so often.
Yeah, for sure. It's given me a whole nother perspective on light and dark, which is so interesting because my birth name is Ebony, right? Which is dark,
Right.
right? So it's so interesting. I have this new perspective, but I've just learned to understand that, dark is really the unknown. It's not evil. I don't demonize it. I understand it to mean the unknown. And once you start to tell yourself some truth, not just truths, I mean, oof, it's so much. Not just truths about, like, your life and how it's happening right now, but, like, the entirety of, you know, life in general and just all the things that exist for us, then it really starts to connect all those dots, and it helps me to understand, my trauma, and to find the purpose in it and to be forgiving and, to thrive, essentially, because I was able to really, like, look at some really hard truths about myself, and it's not about taking blame, and I wanna be really careful that that's not what I'm saying, because I absolutely don't blame myself, but I understand my life, I guess that's the that's the best way that I can say it. And you asked earlier about tips for people, and one thing that was really helpful for me was really getting in touch with my, ancestral lineage. And beyond just my great grandmother who read palms for a living, but really understanding, like, the people you come from and, like, how they understand life and how they practice their spirituality. Or, it's really helpful to know, like, the roots of who you come from, not just the family that's living, not the people in your household. I mean, like, your lineage, your ancestral lineage.
Right. Like genealogy,
Yes.
generations war, I
Yes.
do. I have a big love for that too. I love hearing about my, you know, great, 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 maybe one more great, I'm not sure, grandmother was like she became a concert pianist
Oh,
and she was and if I remember the story correctly, it was like she my on my father's side, this on my father's side, my one of my great 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 grandfathers was the king of Denmark. And this daughter, she was like this free spirit, so to speak,
mhm.
and this, this musician. And basically, if he had more than one wife or, there's other I don't know how the kings work. But anyway, if the kings work, he was not like the first line of queendom. And so anyway,
Okay.
because of her thing, she was kind of like, kicked out or something kind of, and that's how she came eventually to America. But, when you hear those
Mm.
kind of stories, you go, "Oh, maybe that's where I get my free spirit from. Maybe that's where I get my, my musical talent or my acting talent. Maybe it was from her."
Yes.
Know?
Yes.
It it is something that I do think to know how they came into, you know, to our,
Yeah.
ancestral life. It does give us something. And, you said something about the dark you don't consider dark evil or demonize it, but you consider it the unknown,
Yeah.
which is often, I find, the same definition of pain.
Mm.
Pain is often like the unknown. When you're experiencing pain, it seems like it's all of the what ifs or the I don't know. There's something to that. I'm not sure
Yes.
that I'm correct, but my intuition is saying so.
Yes, yes. No, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, definitely, because there's so many things. There are more unknowns in the entirety of our existence as human beings than there are knowns. And of course, that trickles down to our individual experience of life. And so naturally, there are more unknowns about who we are. and our life, currently and how it connects to the entirety of everything that we just don't know, and may never know, and on some level. And so, yeah, my healing journey taught me that um there's just so many unknowns and energy never dies, it just moves from one form of existence into another. And so finding out about your familial and ancestral lineage is really helpful in getting as much as you can understand about those people in their lives, because we're essentially in so many ways like playing out aspects of their lives, right? Because through our DNA, through all kinds of things. And so just really
Absolutely.
it's really helpful to get that information.
And so when you are getting that information, how do you trust, how do you develop more, self-trust in, okay, I think I got some information here, and
Yes.
my first thing is to be like, "Oh, well, you know,
Yes.
what are those kind of rules for, trusting
Mhm.
yourself with that
Yes.
information, and maybe acting upon it more often instead of kind of, second guessing yourself all the time."
Yeah, for sure. I always think it's best to start with, like trusting smaller things, easier things, right? You don't, you may not want to trust that, something that is more abstract for you if that's not how you process life. Maybe you just need to trust that you turn the porch light off, right? And you don't need to go check that you did that, but you just need to trust that you did that. And then in the morning, you'll see, right? Or maybe you just need to trust that, I don't know, like those kinds of things that you've watered your plants, or that that you did you took something that you do kind of autonomously that you do so often that you don't even realize that you do it. Just trusting that those things are taken care of, that the garage door is closed, right? That
Yeah.
the oven is off, whatever it is for you, start with smaller things. And because that will help you to trust yourself. You'll have proof that, oh, I did that. Oh, I did that. I don't have to double check, because it's the key is to not have to not double check the things that you typically double check. So that's a good practice for trusting yourself, but just everyday things, because it
And
will
what if I
connect.
did leave the porch light on? How do I not judge myself?
That is a good question, and I have never thought about when that. But I guess if you didn't,
You go out there and go, "Gosh darn it, the porch light is on."
then that's an indication that, you need to work on that, right? That gives you information that, oh, I could not trust myself in this area. And so it would not be smart for you to start trusting things that you think are your intuition yet, because you're not there. Because it's a I think of it as a muscle, you know? And just like we have to exercise the muscles in our physical body, we have to exercise our intuitive muscles too. So I would start with those smaller everyday second guessing things, and then kind of go from there. And you will absolutely be guided. And another thing I like to share with people is to ask yourself for that guidance, right? Um, I think of us as multi-dimensional beings. And so you want to ask your mind, your body, your soul, and your spirit. I think of them as separate things on every level and dimension of your existence and being to support you. You want all parts of you to support you, because your brain could get in the way, right, of you admitting a truth to yourself, or your heart could get in the way of that. So you want all the parts of you to kind of be harmonious, and you want to ask them to work in that way.
Okay. And I think that's interesting because a lot of times we don't ask. We don't even ask ourselves, like,
Yeah.
and that's a real aha moment for me, like, how often do I stop and just ask
Yes.
myself?
And because there's so much intelligence that we have, and because we're so smart, we don't think we have to ask, right? So, and again, that's part of cultivating that relationship with the self. And then once you
Right.
ask, you will see how quickly it shows up for you. I mean, you can ask yourself of something and give it to yourself. Right. It's incredible how that works. So, and it might be helpful to think of your intuitive self. Um, I was gonna say, think of it as like a separate person maybe, right? And talk to it in the same way you would talk to a good friend, you know? And cultivate the relationship with it that way, even though it's you and it's all inside of you, but it's a part of us that we just have denied from so much of our lives, you know?
Yeah. So as an intuitive, healer and coach, you've done some writing as well. I think you should tell, our audience about some of those things that you are currently, up to and have done that you are still doing, and
Mhm.
people will know how to get in touch, with you if they wanted to do that. But you mostly like call yourself the clairtangent.
It
That's the main one that you
Yeah.
use most.
Yeah, for sure, because, like I said, it triggers the other things for me, and the other things are happening even when I'm not doing that work, but just, like, I have to give it a space that the public can understand it, so that's the way I talk about it. I keep it under the clear tangent heading, to simplify it. So, yeah, I've written a book, that teaches people how to access more of their intuition, and we've been talking to publishers about it for a while now, and I'm really excited for it to come out soon. And it's really written in layman's terms. I don't talk about the clairs in that book at all because I really wanted it to be accessible to everyone, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't know if everyone is ready for like clear senses. And so, yeah, it's a very,
We definitely all know we have intuition. We
yes,
talk about it all the time, but we don't necessarily have a guide as to how to get better in touch with that
yes,
intuition or that gut feeling or that your gut will just tell you so much. I
yes,
cannot express how important that is when we're talking about certainly about um, dangerous situations.
yep,
When you're an adult, especially, you can have those gut feelings about something, whether it would be related to sexual assault or abuse or grooming
yep,
or one of those sorts of things. And yet, it can be so easily manipulated because we so often don't have that kind of trust. We have not developed the self-trust,
yep,
especially, innocent kids and tweens, teenagers, young adults. You're still developing in all those things. So
yep.
as you, being a coach now, as you went from trauma, the trauma that you experienced, how does that intuition,
Hmm.
so that it's accessible to everyone who might be listening,
Yeah.
how did you use that to heal from trauma?
Oh, well, it guided me to so many activities, and things that supported my healing. And I had a conversation with what is his name? Dr. James Gordon, who is does a lot of work on trauma and healing. And he had written a book on transformation a few years ago. And I met him in person and I asked him, how was I able I asked him the same question, right? How did that happen? And he said, well, what were you doing? And I told him I was meditating, I was doing yoga, I was doing crystal therapy. Like I said, I'm mystic, I'm very much into crystals. And he said, "Oh, well, that's what did it." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And he said that there's something called a natural conversation that the mind and the body are always having. They're always communicating with each other. And so those activities that I was doing, they were so loving and they supported me and being able to like admit that this horrible thing happened to me, which then, I did it several things to make sure I was taking good care of myself. I went to therapy, had a past life regression. Um, Painting was really big for me. That the two paintings behind me are my own. So it's really about allowing yourself to receive the information and following the guidance. Because we will all be guided to different things in different ways based on who we are and our individual experiences. So once you allow yourself to be guided, then it really takes off. Yes. So it's about opening yourself up to that.
Up to the guidance,
Yeah.
opening yourself up to the guide.
Opening yourself up
Guidance
to the guidance.
that's here.
Yeah, the guidance that's already inside of you. And, I want to share too that the gut instinct is really the beginner level because we can feel intuition anywhere in our body from head to toe. Your body will give you so much information about um, either like yes or no to something, if something feels good to you or not, if someone is lying or not. Like your body is telling it, again, it's happening all the time. We're just not paying enough attention. But, like if you're someone who, um, you know, clenches your jaw or raises your shoulders or, you crunch your toes in your shoes, those kinds of things, they're giving you information. If your body is responding like that to something you're being told or to something you're feeling in an environment that you're in, that's all your intuition too. All of those are little signs.
Mm. That's interesting because I know that sometimes I'll catch myself with that, like my toes clenched in my shoe, and I'm like, "What's wrong? What's going on?"
Yeah.
Because I didn't notice it, but then I do. All of a sudden, I'm like, "Oh, something's up.
Yep.
Something's off." Something, and then
Yep.
to just try to kind of tune in, tap in,
Yes.
tune in, whatever. Yeah.
Yes. Exactly. To see what information, you're picking up on that your body is telling you that you're picking up on it. Because that's all intuition is. It's information. So
Same. So if somebody wanted to work with you, how would they get in touch with you? Are you easily accessible, Ebony?
I hope so. I have a website, which is just my name, ebonybanks.me, EBONI. And then I share lots of information on my Instagram. I just finished a series about the seven clear senses, and I have video going into more detail about what they are and how to know if that's like your gift. Um,
Is that on YouTube or where do you
it's on Instagram. They're on my Instagram. Yeah, so my Instagram, you can link from my website. It's at Intuitive Ebony Writes, but those are the best places to find me. You can book appointments there as well on my website if you want.
Oh, that's wonderful. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else that, you're like, "Oh, this was burning in my intuitive heart and gut."
I mean,
We didn't forget anything. I mean,
yes,
obviously, there's so much more to this conversation. I'm sure we could go on.
yes.
This has really been an interesting conversation for me because sometimes I think I know something in my I know that knowingness, that Claire, whatever the one was, the knowing Claire
Cognizance.
cognizant,
Mhm.
and yet I want to believe something different. I
Yeah.
want to believe that, oh, but with just a little more time or a little more help or a little more this or that,
Yep.
somehow I'm gonna, make something better or change something. And I think that's also, human nature to wanna,
Of course.
sometimes we just hold on too long.
Yep.
So
Yep. I mean, I guess the biggest takeaway I want people to know is that you know, it's not a woo-woo thing. It's a very
right.
real, practical, thing. And what you just spoke of is really where all the work lives. Because once you open yourself up to receive your intuition, you're gonna have a lot of those experiences that you just spoke of, like, "Oh, do you wanna follow it? Do you wanna listen to it?" Right? And so that is where the work is. But once you open yourself up, that's gonna happen quite easily and naturally. And the work is gonna be in you kind of, um, having to fight with your brain over fighting with your intuition, you know?
So basically, you're saying that the intuition really lives in your body, not in your brain. The brain really is just that one thing that just is trying to keep us alive.
That's how I understand it. I think intuition is more intelligent than the brain because it knows what the brain doesn't know. In my case, with repressing my trauma, I always knew, like my intuition always knew, but my brain wouldn't let me accept it because it was a coping mechanism for me to not allow my brain to accept it. And your intuition.
Literally not remember the trauma, or was it just trauma happened? I've turned that off. How would you describe when you're saying I couldn't, I wouldn't or couldn't see it? Or
The way I understand it is that I did not have an awareness that that happened to me. I did not have a conscious awareness that that happened because my brain pushed it so it hurt me so deeply, and my brain pushed it so far away from my consciousness that it's as if it didn't happen. So I'm behaving as if it didn't happen because I didn't have a conscious awareness of it anymore. Do you get that?
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I learned from a therapist that repression is a very typical response, to rape specifically.
Yes. And to childhood rape and a lot of
Yeah,
people that have very, very few memories of, what happened, but they know something happened. They can know certain things
yep,
and one of our another person that we often do, work with on our Thrivivors community, our online community. We have, special guests that come in and talk about things like what you're talking about today, or, we have a detective that then became a trauma informed specialist, and he talks about implicit and explicit memories, that implicit memories are things that you
Mm.
think or kind of a story around something or whatever, and then maybe the right smell. See, this is where what you're saying ties back to trauma.
Yes.
A specific smell, a specific touch,
Yes.
a specific seeing something,
Yes.
all of a sudden will bring that implicit memory into
Yep.
an explicit
Yep.
place. And I think that's really an interesting thing about all those senses.
Yes. Yes. And the journey through when it comes specifically to the clair senses, the journey is really through the five senses. It's just it's more information that you're getting, but it starts with the five senses. So we're just so much greater than we know. And I feel like people who are trauma survivors or have experienced trauma are really we specifically, I think, have a really, we have a greater capacity than people who haven't experienced trauma to get to this understanding of ourselves because our life is kind of forcing us to, you know? And that's how I see my healing journey as such a gift because had I not experienced the trauma, I would not have gone on this healing journey and I would not have gotten to all these places in my awareness of myself and of life, that I have. And for people who don't experience trauma, they never delve deeper into that. They never go into that kind of deep self inquiry because
Yeah.
nothing in their life asked them to.
Right. They didn't have to. I
They
know
didn't have
that
to.
quote by William Shakespeare that I
Mhm.
can't tell it to you exactly, even though I'm an actress. But it says some are born into greatness, some, create or they make something great, and then
Yeah.
others, greatness is thrust upon them.
Yes.
And I think people who survive,
Yep.
really, really difficult things, the greatness is being, you know, thrust upon them.
Yes.
And so taking the opportunity to then, figure out, okay, I do want to deal with this. I do want to know my uh, myself, have
Yes.
self-trust, have that intuition, listen to, the senses all over my body, as you said. I always call it my gut, but now I won't be able to do that anymore.
Yeah.
Because now you taught me something new that well, and it is really true because I was thinking about that, like, I was just at a something just day before yesterday, and it was like I was at McDonald's, and I could just all of a sudden, I had the sensation, and not because I was, with my ex-husband and my son, but because maybe of what we were talking about or something, I don't know, but all of a sudden, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm not breathing." My shoulders are like and then my feet, the toes in my shoes,
Mhm.
in my tennis shoes. I had on really comfortable shoes, but it was so funny. At one point, I was like, "Okay, you have to calm
Mm.
down so that
Breathe.
you can allow the right thoughts or the right conversation to unfold."
Yes.
It was really interesting how I had this very specific, like, "Oh," and a lot of people say, "Well, breathe." Like,
Yes.
okay, but it's more than just breathing. It's like, I want to be able to flow or to be able to say or feel from the others around me,
Yeah.
the best course, for myself and
Yep.
for even other people in my life that I care about.
I love that, and that's such a beautiful example because that's exactly how it happens. We're brought the awareness comes to us in some way, shape, or form, and it's just our job to sit with it. Just sit with it instead of, like, ignoring it like we do most of the time, just to sit with it and say, "What else is attempting to be communicated to me in this moment?" You know?
What else is attempting to be communicated with me in this moment?
Yep.
I love that. Now you're William Shakespeare to me. That's so good. What more is trying to be communicated in this moment? I love that so much.
Yeah.
That's really great. Ooh, that's a good way to probably tie up this podcast, to just sit with that, to listen, to just sit with what else is this moment, this feeling, these
Yep.
physical sensations. What is trying to be communicated with me? It's just more information. It's just more
Yep.
kind of data, but not the brain data. Every other piece
Yes.
of the physical, the mental, the emotional, the spiritual body.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, Ebony, what an amazing conversation. I've loved it so much.
I'm so glad you like it. I hope it all makes sense. Like it's so big, and so I try to talk about it in a way that is accessible. So I hope it all is clear.
Oh, I think so. I definitely think so. And I think it really is so important because trauma survivors that are, really interested in thriving and
Yeah.
being more, what's the word? I call it freed up,
Yeah.
being freed up from, that heavy weight. I think this is one of the ways that often gets overlooked because
Yeah.
something happened to us that made us not trust ourselves or
Yes.
to feel an extreme amount of shame or guilt or the things that don't free us up. And also, I think being able to give it over to that greatness thrust upon us, as you were talking about,
Mhm.
also gives us a sense of being able to let go and to realize that there was
Yes.
something, in the experience that I could, I don't like to always throw that on every survivor. Well, you're supposed to learn all these things, from that horrible, horrible thing that happened to you. I don't, I try not to say it that way, but there really is only one choice. Does it destroy
Yes.
you, or do you get to move to another, level of your own
Awareness.
actualization and awareness?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and I think all trauma survivors are we're so, like, great in that way, and once you make the choice to get to know more, it's like you will find your greatness, and that's really the light in the dark that you spoke of a while ago, right? It's like, that's
Yeah.
you will see who you really are, what you're capable of, you know?
And that I love because I love when people, and myself included, have those discoveries. Like we are capable of way more than we think we are, or than
Absolutely.
when this problem started or this, horrible thing happened. And then,
Yep.
gosh, and really truly, I do think it is a good practice to look back and go, oh, I have come a long way. I'm
Yeah.
still a work in progress, but
Yep.
I think it's important to just daily be able
Yes.
to live in a new day, a new moment.
Yes.
It's not like I can do that all the time. I'm certainly not perfect at it, but this allows me to once again trust,
Yeah.
my own intuition, and that my own awareness can guide me, you
Yes.
know,
Absolutely.
anybody
Totally,
else.
totally, absolutely, and it's a journey, so I implore everyone to be easy with themselves, because it's a muscle that you haven't used in a long time, or not,
Right.
maybe not in this way ever, I should say.
Right, and that muscle, just like any muscle you wanna build,
Yep,
there has to be resistance
yep,
or you can't build the muscle.
yep.
That it doesn't happen that you can, just, like, without a weight in your hand, or, a push-up on the floor or something,
Yep,
you have to have resistance. So I think when we have those moments in our life where we're experiencing some resistance, that gives the opportunity, that gives way to the opportunity
yeah,
to practice, to build the muscle, as you
yes.
said. Well, Ebony Banks, you are so light. You just have this light bursting out of
Thank you.
smile in every way.
I'm so happy to hear that. I had such a good time. Thank you for this conversation. So juicy.
It was juicy. I loved it. And I just really hope you have something light and something fun to do the rest of your day today. What's next
Yes.
on your
Well, it's been rain. I'm in New York City, and you guys have seen the floods on the news. Luckily, my neighborhood didn't get any of that, or the area of Brooklyn that I'm in. So, and today it's 74 and sunny, and there's a festival, a street festival, literally outside my door.
Well, thank you. Again, Ebony spelled with an I, Eboni,
Yeah.
Banks, Banks. And if we just know your name, we can find you, whether it's on Instagram or a
Yeah.
website.
Yeah.
Um, and any other ways, we'll put those in our show notes.
Okay.
Thank you so much for being.
Thank you so much.